Here we're looking at number 96 in the sessions. Session number 96, entitled Preparation for Resurrection Day. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that before we take a look at the events of Resurrection Sunday, it'll be helpful to know what we do know for a fact and what we cannot know for a fact. I'm afraid there are many things we believe we know as fact that may or may not be true, and they may or may not have an effect on our understanding of Resurrection Day. We know certain things happen. It turned dark. It was now sometime in the morning. Some women went to the tombs. They found the tomb empty. Somewhere along the way, angels had opened the tomb, rolled the stone back. The guards that were there were disabled in some respect by their fear, and that eventually Jesus appeared to these women, and that there were all kinds of people around that we don't know about, many kinds of followers. The women from Galilee that followed Jesus, the 11 original disciples chosen by Jesus as his inner group, other followers who were not in either of those groups, in particular 2 from Emmaus that will be on the road with Jesus later in the day. So there are these 3 sets around. Now, what do we not know? We don't know where any one of them, individually or by group, spent the night in Jerusalem. We assume it was in Jerusalem. Suppose it didn't have to be. Some speculate that the women may even have gone to Bethany. That poses a bit of a snag, but it's a minor one, not really. I've seen it poses concern over the amount of travel one could do during a Sabbath. And the women that we're going to be discussing with evidently kept the Sabbath, which means they didn't travel more than a Sabbath's journey, which was, as I think we mentioned, something like 3,000 feet, a little over a half a mile. So we don't know. If they stayed in Jerusalem, they could have gone to Mount of Olives and back again. But if they were on Gethsemane, could they have? Well, it depends upon whether they could get, if they went to Bethany, could they get to Gethsemane without going through Jerusalem? Because if they had to go through Jerusalem to get to some garden, at least, wherever the tomb was, they'd had to travel more than a Sabbath day journey. But if they stayed in Jerusalem, that wouldn't be an issue. But it doesn't really matter, does it? Since most of the events of Resurrection Sunday happened after the Sabbath, the Saturday Sabbath, so that should not have been an issue for us. But we don't know where they stayed. We don't know if the group that went to the tomb first stayed together in one house, or whether they're spread out but knew where they would group. We don't know that. Probably not important. They knew it. Likewise, we're not told whether the original 11 overnighted in one location or several. But again, we don't know, but it probably doesn't matter because they knew. And nor were the 2 from Emmaus. We don't know where they stayed either. Did they come to Jerusalem Sunday morning, or did they come for the Sabbath or for the entire Passover week and stay in Jerusalem that night with the 11 or with not? We don't know. They know. They knew what was going to be needed. We will find out that the 2 from Emmaus did have some contact during the morning, or early day at least, of Sunday. They had some contact with others of the group. So they were not isolated from other men and women. We are told in Scripture for sure that after the switch from Saturday to Sunday, sometime after 6 p.m. Saturday evening, some women went somewhere and purchased spices, evidently thinking that perhaps Joseph and Nicodemus hadn't finished the entombing process. So they purchased more spices, evidently going back to the tomb. Keep in mind that everything that tells us for why they're going to the tomb implies that they had no belief that there would be a resurrection. They thought they would find Christ in the tomb and finish the entombing process. So, sometime early also, I suspect it was Sunday morning sometime, there was an earthquake that opened access to the tomb. An earthquake that was in conjunction with the appearance of some angels. How many angels? Well, at least two, apparently. We didn't know how many women. We do not know how many guards. There are lots of things we don't know about this. But sometime that morning, and probably before the women got on the road to head to the tomb. Why do I say that? Because Scripture never gives us an indication that they knew anything about the earthquake. So it was not a horrendous earthquake. It evidently was a fairly quiet event. We don't know that they were ever aware of it because they didn't think about the having access to the tomb. Along the way, they discussed the concern that they themselves couldn't roll the stone back. So somehow the stone had to get rolled back. They evidently did not even know that there would be guards there. And that's kind of interesting. When did the angels arrive at the tomb? I'm starting to do like the gospel writers do and telescope things together, in particular the words of a sentence. Are angels and arrive? Angels and arrive gets arangels. So, I'm not sure that has anything to do about my concussion or from my concussion, but it might. Well, so when did the angels get there with respect to when the women got there? Well, before they did, apparently. They're told that at least one of them rolled the stone back. Presumably, roll back means up the incline that we've talked about. They didn't just dump the stone away, it was rolled back. Were they present on a continuing basis, or did they come and go through the entire narrative? We don't know. When they were present, were they always in the same position? Probably not, because of some of the things we are told. So they probably moved around. How much? We don't know. Even if they were always present, were they always visible or not? Angels are spirits, remember, which means in and of themselves they're not visible. So did they have to remain visible during their whole time there? I don't know, but I suspect not. How many angels appeared during the events? Well, we know that there have been reports of at least two. Could be more, we don't know. Guards were posted Saturday morning, we were told that. They were posted on the Sabbath. So if the women were not out running around on the Sabbath, and apparently they were not, they would not have known about the guards. How many guards? We're not told. They had a negative reaction to the earthquake and the angels. Scripture did say they look like dead men. What does that mean? We don't know for sure. How long were they in that dead appearance? We don't know that either. Were they present or conscious, or were they out cold when the women arrived? The women don't mention them as if they were of not any consequence or even there. We just simply don't know everything about these sequences. At some point, the guards did, we know, regain their capacity, and they left the tomb to go into the city and report to the chief priests. And they apparently knew that the tomb was empty. How did they learn that? We don't know that either. Did the guards see Jesus leave the tomb? I doubt it, because that stone was rolled to let people in, not to let Jesus out. At least there's no indication that they had to let Jesus out. We know that Jesus apparently could go through walls and so forth in his risen state. So, we can't make any conjecture. Well, we can make conjectures, but we can't give any proofs. We're not told, for example, either whether all the women went to the tomb as a group, as a single group. As they arrived at the tomb, were they all together or were they in separate groups? Were they arriving at different times, or did they arrive all at once? Nor do we know how many women there really were at any one time. In fact, we don't even know whether Mary Magdalene may have gone to the tomb by herself before the others. That's something that John's Gospel allows us to think might have happened, but he doesn't say she went by herself. He only focuses on her. So, did she go with the group in the morning, in the dark? Some of her activities, however, seem to indicate that even if she went with them in the morning, she had to separate from them at some point, because she did some individual private sorts of things that the other women did not do, at least as far as we know they didn't do. If she went with the group initially, she must have separated at some point. So, did she not? We don't know. That means that there are going to be lots of possible sequences people could put together that would be consistent with the four Gospels' pictures of Sunday morning. Most of which would never have happened, but one of them did. Which one? We cannot know. Have to keep that in mind. That's key for how we're going to go after this story. The angels interacted with some of the women, explaining the meaning of the tomb. There's no indication about the angels working with any of the men, just the women. And all women, or just a group of women? We're not told. Mary Magdalene now reported somewhere along the way to Peter and John, apparently privately. The other women, appear to have reported to the 11, and perhaps others who were with the 11 later in the morning. Now, were those both, what did they report? Well, both of them appeared to have reported the empty tomb, not having visited with Jesus. Jesus apparently had not met with any of them or appeared to any of them. All the women reports were not originally believed. Peter and John, however, did take off and investigate Mary Magdalene's report and verified that it was true. But when they verified it for the other 9, we don't know. Generally, the women were not believed concerning the empty tomb. Again, at the time of those reports of the empty tomb, Jesus apparently had not appeared to anyone. But then he did appear to Mary Magdalene separately from the other women. At least it would appear that that was the case. And later he appeared to a full contingent of women. Whether Mary Magdalene was present in that second appearing or not, we don't know. She may have been, she may not have been. Were there 2 reports by the women to the larger group of disciples and followers, or just one? First, they reported about the empty tomb. It seems that then sometime they reported about the appearance of Jesus. That would imply that they had made 2 reports. It seems that Mary Magdalene also made 2 reports, first to Peter and John, and then a statement perhaps to all of them about Jesus' appearance to her. Did the group of women, the big group of women, venture back out into the streets after the report of the empty tomb? They had to meet Jesus somewhere, right? And apparently Jesus met them after they had reported the empty tomb. That's, I suppose, a bit shaky, but it may have been. Just when were the 2 from the Emmaus Road present? And what reports did they hear? Well, it turns out, although I've never heard anybody make an issue of it, when you listen to the conversation between the 2 on the Emmaus Road and Jesus, they tell you that they heard reports from the women about the empty tomb, but nothing about appearances of Jesus. Not that they denied it. They said the men had not seen Jesus. And of course our belief is that the men didn't see Jesus till later in the day. Most of them until that evening even. But Peter may have seen Jesus somewhere during the day. Well, why all the concern of what we do know versus all we don't know? If we can paint a reasonable picture from the 4 Gospels, isn't that enough? Yes, it is. But you need to understand why it's enough. Because unbelievers are likely to claim the narrative of Sunday morning is full of contradictions between the 4 Gospels and cannot possibly have the morning events as described cannot possibly have happened according to what the 4 Gospels describe. How will they arrive at that? They say, let me show you how you put these together, and it comes up with the contradiction. And they can do that, certainly. What are they really claiming by their contradiction angle, though? They're proving that a proven contradiction is used as a proof, at least they're using it as a proof, that the events cannot possibly have happened as described. But let me ask you this question. Have they proved that every possible sequence of events must include a contradiction that denies its possibility? If they come up with a contradiction, they're only talking about one possible sequence. But what about all the rest of the possible sequence? Our task is to be able to show that at least one logically consistent sequence according to the four Gospels can be shown to exist as a possibility. And if they have not ruled that possibility out, they cannot claim to have ruled out the possibility of a valid sequence as described. So it just takes one counterexample to what they claim to show that they have not verified anything concerning the truth of the gospel records. They must have shown that every possible logically consistent sequence of events from the gospel records, every one of them has to have a contradiction that says it can't have happened. So as long as there's one possibility that is consistent, they cannot make the claim that it could not have happened. Showing that there is a contradiction from one sequence of events does not prove anything if there are other possible sequence of events. And believe me, I have about either 7 or 8 possible logically consistent sequences that have no contradiction. I can simply say there are 7 or 8 different ways it could have happened. Which one of those is the way it happened? I don't know. Maybe none of them. But as long as it's possible, you cannot claim that the matters cannot have happened. So the fact that there were women to the tomb was empty, guards were there part of the time, angels were there part of the time, Jesus visited women during this time, that is verifiable fact, in the sense that you cannot prove it did not happen. So what have you got? Well, you got a standoff. The disbeliever can't prove it didn't happen. You can't produce the sequence that it had to happen, but you can prove that it is possible to happen according to the four Gospels' description. So you cannot claim they are wrong. You cannot verify that they are right either. But every other thing about the Gospels does indicate they're right. As a man of faith, I only need to know that it is possible for the gospel record to be true and impossible to prove it is in error. If that's the case, that it's possible for the record to be true, impossible to prove it's in error, I will go with gospel as true. Next time, we'll get on trying to unravel at least one sequence that is non-contradictory in the events. It will match all four gospel narratives to a T. Will it be the way it really happened? I don't know. I don't care. Gospel said that sequence, some sequence, did happen. I have shown it's possible. Good enough. It happened because of things that happened later. So, if that's not confusing enough to you, we'll get on with producing one sequence that is verifiable as logically consistent and possible. Got it? We'll be there and see what that sequence looks like. It probably isn't precisely what you think happened. We'll see you.